lights, camera, podcast. This is the Silver Screen Sessions podcast with your host, Pete. Your fortnightly dose of movie talk, reviews, and all things film. From blockbusters to hidden gems, Pete will be breaking down what's worth watching, what's overrated, and everything in between. So grab your popcorn, take your seats, and let's roll the reel.
Welcome back to the Silver Screen Sessions podcast, where we dive deep into the films that aimed high, flew fast, and sometimes crashed spectacularly on re-entry. I'm Pete, your captain for today's flight through nostalgia and neon. And we're heading into deep space, or at least 1999's idea of deep space, with Wing Commander starring Freddie Prinze Jr., Matthew Lillard, Saffron Burrows. It's a movie based on one of the biggest video game franchises of the early 90s, a time when floppy disks ruled and FMV cutscenes were the height of storytelling. This was a film that promised epic dogfights, futuristic fighter pilots, and galactic stakes. What we got was, well, something between Top Gun and Starship Troopers, filtered through a mid-budget 90s lens. It didn't quite conquer the galaxy, but it's an underrated slice of late 90s sci-fi ambition, dripping with charm, chaos, and chrome. So, power up your jump drives, check your radar, and let's launch into Wing Commander. So the story, the war among the stars. So alright, let's set the scene. The year's 2654. Humanity, represented by the Terran Confederation, is locked in a brutal war against a feline-like alien species known as the Kilrathi. Think space lines with attitude, if those lines had to be redesigned on a budget. Our protagonist is Lieutenant Christopher Blair, played by Freddie Prinze Jr., a rookie pilot of mixed heritage known as a pilgrim. Now, pilgrims aren't just space explorers. They're part myth, part outcast, descendants of humanity's earliest spacefarers who've evolved over the uncanny ability to navigate through jump space without computers. It's as if the Force met quantum math. Blair and his best friend, the ever-reckless Todd Maniac Marshall, played by Matthew Lillard, arrived aboard the TCS Tigerclaw, a space carrier that's essentially the last line of defense between the Kilrathi and Earth. When the aliens steal a navigation beacon capable of revealing Earth's location, the Tigerclaw becomes humanity's last hope. Blair must face prejudice from his crewmates, earn his commander's trust, and embrace his mysterious pilgrim instincts to outmaneuver the enemy and save the Confederation. It's Star Trek meets Top Gun. Friendship, loyalty, explosions, and a good dose of 90s hero angst. What's fascinating about Wing Commander is how seriously it takes itself. There's no winking at the audience, no meta jokes, it's earnest, even when the dialogue feels like it came out of a PlayStation cutscene. And that's part of the charm. So the cast, young guns in space. So let's talk about the cast, because Wing Commander was one of those late 90s capsules of familiar faces. If you had Freddie Prinze Jr., Hollywood's go-to teen heartthrob from She's All That, suddenly finds himself piloting a starfighter. He brings sincerity, though sometimes you can sense he's trying to deliver space jargon like he's still in a high school rom-com. Matthew Lillard is his perfect foil as Maniac, loud, brash, and full of chaotic energy. He's reckless, endearing, and occasionally unhinged, like if you cross Goose with Jim Carrey in a flight suit. He gets all the fun lines, and even when the tone wobbles, Lillard commits 110%. Then there's Saffron Burrows as Commander Angel Devereaux, tough, controlled, and carrying emotional depth beneath the surface. She's the kind of leader you'd actually follow into a battle, and she gives the movie its most grounded moments. Rounding out the leadership ranks, we've got Cheikh Caro as Commander Gerald, gruff, noble, and seemingly made of gravel. And let's not forget David Suchet, yes, Poirot himself, as Admiral Tolwyn, who dispatches our heroes into danger. Jürgen Prochnow, famous from Das Boot, brings gravitas as the Tigerclaw's captain. His presence alone adds credibility, that weary commander energy you just can't fake. And while the cast might feel like an odd ensemble, French actors, British icons, American heartthrobs, that's part of what makes it fascinating. It's a multinational crew in a film that wants to feel global. The chemistry doesn't always land, but you can tell they're trying. and the sincerity is the secret sauce that keeps Wing Commander from being just another forgetting flop. So behind the scenes, from the video game to the big screen. Now this is where things get interesting. Wing Commander was directed by Chris Roberts, the man who created the video game series. He was a pioneer. Back in the early 90s, he pushed cinematic storytelling in games long before it was standard. He envisioned video games as interactive movies, complete with branching storylines and live-action cutscenes starring actors like Mark Hamill and Malcolm McDowell. So naturally, Hollywood said, why not give him a real movie? The result? A $30 million space opera that wanted to be Battlestar Galactica meets Saving Private Ryan. But here's the catch. Roberts was a visionary, not necessarily an experienced filmmaker. The leap from game engine to film set was steep. The production struggled with scale, visual effects, and the famous pre-Star Wars hype machine. Remember, this film came out 2 months before The Phantom Menace, so when audience saw a new space movie trailer attached to Wing Commander, they rushed to theatres, watched the Star Wars preview, then, you guessed it, left. Ouch. Imagine buying a movie ticket, sitting through the previews, and then walking out once the trailer ends. That's got to sting. Visual effects were handled by Digital Anvil, Robert's own company. They were pushing boundaries, but the technology just wasn't quite there yet. The CGI was ambitious but limited, especially compared to what George Lucas was about to unleash. And the Kilrathi. Oh boy. Fans of the games were expecting fierce, feline warriors, lion-like conquerors with snarling faces and fur. Instead, we got hairless, rubbery reptilian aliens lurking in the shadows. They barely appear on screen, possibly because even the director realised they looked, well, not great. Think cat meets turtle, but the Uncanny Valley. Yep, that. Still, credit where it's due. This was a bold attempt to bring gaming cinematic storytelling to the big screen long before The Last of Us or Sonic the Hedgehog made it work. So soundtrack and style, 90s vibes in Deep Space Nine. So let's talk style, because Wing Commander might have stumbled in plot, but aesthetically, it's pure 1999 perfection. The score, co-composed by Kevin Kiner and David Arnold, absolutely soars. Arnold, who scored Stargate and Independence Day, gives us that same sweeping, heroic orchestral sound. It feels big, even when the sets don't. You've got militaristic brass, emotional strings, and just enough synth to remind you it's the late 90s. The music elevates every scene, especially the dogfights. The production design is another highlight. Instead of going for Star Wars shine, the filmmakers opted for gritty realism. The Tiger Claw feels less like the Millennium Falcon and more like a World War II submarine. Claustrophobic, metallic, and battered from war. That submarine in space aesthetic actually works. You can smell the oil, feel the vibration of engines, hear the echoes of footsteps down narrow corridors. It's immersive in its own way. Visually, it's drenched in that late 90s blue-grey palette. Moody, cold, industrial. The cinematography by Thierry Arbogast, who shot The Fifth Element, gives it some real flair, even when the CGI doesn't hold up. And let's not forget the costumes. Bulky flight suits that look like someone raided Top Gun and then glued on bits of Power Rangers armour. It's a look, for sure. But it's a look I kind of miss. Practical, chunky, tactile sci-fi. No sleek chrome, no holographic jumpsuits, just metal, sweat, and grit. So underneath all the pew-pew and pixel dust, there's actually some genuine thematic weight here. At its core, Wing Commander is about identity and belonging. Blair, as a pilgrim, is both revered and mistrusted. His heritage makes him different, which becomes a metaphor for prejudice and for the fear unknown. There's also a strong undercurrent of loyalty versus independence. Do you follow orders blindly, or do you trust your instincts when everything's on the line? Blair's conflict with authority, especially with his commanding officers, speaks to that eternal tension between soldier and soul. And of course, their sacrifice. Stable of war films, the camaraderie, the losses, the small acts of courage that define what it means to fight, not for glory, but for survival. It's not subtle, But that's okay, the best 90s sci-fi never was. So the legacy, what went wrong and what endured? When Wing Commander hit theatres, critics were, safe to say, not kind. The film barely made its budget, and reviews called it derivative, confusing, and dated one arrival. But over time, it's found a second life. Among gamers, it's remembered fondly, not because it was perfect, but because it tried. It was one of the first serious attempts to bridge gaming and cinema long before it was fashionable. And honestly, if you look at the modern space games like Star Citizen, also created by Chris Roberts, you can see the DNA of Wing Commander all over them. The concept of immersive world-building, cinematic storytelling, complex space warfare, all of that started here. Even its failures taught Hollywood lessons about adaptation. You can't just transfer game mechanics to a film. You need emotional structure, pacing, and tone that fit the medium. So while Wing Commander may not have won the box office battle, it fought an important war for the future of game-based cinema. So, after revisiting it, how does Wing Commander hold up in 2025? The CGI's rough, the dialogue's clunky, and the editing sometimes feel it was done during turbulence. But there's heart. You can tell this movie was made by people who genuinely loved the source material, who wanted to capture the sense of space pilot heroism and 90s optimism. It's earnest, it's weirdly comforting, and it feels like a VHS relic from a more innocent era of sci-fi filmmaking. My rating, 6.5 out of 10. A noble failure, but one with courage, charm, and just enough nostalgia to make it worth a revisit. And there you have it. Wing Commander, the film that aimed for hyperspace, missed by a parsec, but still managed to leave a vapor trail through pop culture. It's scrappy, it's sincere, and it's exactly the kind of film we love exploring here. The ones that dared to dream big, even when their engines sputtered. If you're into Top Gun, Battlestar Galactica, Event Horizon, or anything with retro cockpit chatter and synth-soaked dogfights, give it a spin. Thanks for tuning in to the Silver Screen Sessions podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, hit follow, leave a rating, and share with your movie buffs, friends, and retro gamers in your orbit. Next time, we're trading spaceships for stage lights as we dive into That Thing You Do, Tom Hanks's 90s gem about one-hit wonders, broken strings, and the pure joy of making music. Until then, keep your shields up, your engines running hot, and remember, in every failed mission, there's still a little victory.